Want to expand the reach of your content? Start a podcast. Feature industry experts on your show and leverage the influence and reach of your guests to grow your brand. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I am your host for today's episode, Nikki Ivy with Sweetfish Media. Guys, I've got with me today Ben Slater, who is VP of Marketing at Beamery. Ben, how you doing today?
I'm good, thanks, Nikki. How about you?
I'm doing well. You know, the sun is shining here in Austin, Texas, so I cannot complain. So we're going to be talking about, what I'm super interested to get into it, why marketing strategies should be applied to recruiting. It sounds so common sense, but I'm not sure I'm seeing it out there a lot. So I'm really excited for you to get into that. But first, I'd love it if you, Ben, would just give us a little bit of background on yourself and what you and the folks at Beamery have been up to these days.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to give a bit of context. So I'm actually dialing in from sunny for today, London. We do have an office in Austin, so I get out there sometimes. But as you said, I run marketing here at Beamery. We are a talent operating system. So we're, I guess, a single platform to help companies attract, engage, and retain the right talent. But I know a lot of the people tuning in are sales and marketing folk, and I think the easiest way of understanding or kind of, I guess, getting to grips with what we try and do as a company is, Beamery is Salesforce plus Marketo, but for talent acquisition. So we're, the technology that helps recruiting organizations build their employment brand, attract the right talent, and really build and nurture a pipeline of the best possible candidates for their organization. The ones that are diverse and are the people that are really going to power the future transformation of their enterprise, and do that proactively and approach it in the same way as a sales and marketing process. So taking a lot of those well-established tactics and reapplying it to a talent context.
Perfect, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. And you and I were talking offline. It sounds like such a common sense thing, but because, as you also mentioned offline, because recruiting has been a few years behind sales and marketing when it comes to the technology, this isn't something that's happening as widely spread. And so there just aren't as many folks who are benefiting from this approach, right? This applying these marketing strategies. So start off with just an overview of the big question, the why, and then we'll get into some of the smaller little bullet pointed examples of what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a few big whys, right? If you look broadly at the kind of societal shifts that we've gone through over the last kind of decade, anything from, the ease of use that you have, the ease of taking out your cell phone and ordering an Uber, right? Compare that to applying for a job, right? The average job application includes a bunch of form fills. It includes, hurdles you need to jump through. And that application experience is pretty jarring, right? Particularly when you compare it with getting a cab nowadays. So I think organizations are moving in the direction of is making the way that they touch candidates from a talent perspective. It's kind of marrying that experience up from the way that they think about engaging with consumers, because at the end of the day, it's easy to kind of separate the two out because recruiting is a different business unit to marketing. But really, we're talking about the same people. We're talking about people that might buy your product one day and apply for a job at your company the next day. And if the experience is dramatically different, then there's an issue. I think you ideally want the two to marry up effectively. And, you don't want someone who applies for a job at your company to get so disgruntled afterwards that they stop buying your product. So I guess to kind of summarize, there's a big societal shift, and I think companies are adapting to meet the new expectations of candidates.
Absolutely. And it goes into that concept that you and I talked about offline, the first little bullet point, which is that candidates are looking for customization. And there is that parallel between what candidates are looking for and, like you talked about, what prospects are looking for, and how that dictates how they're marketed to. Talk a little bit about that for us.
Yeah, so I mean, the word we talk about a lot, I mean, the phrase we talk a lot about at Beamery is actually treat candidates like customers. And I think that kind of picks up. I mean, firstly, it's a nice little thing to have on, stickers and have up on the wall of the office. But yeah, it's catchy, right? But it really kind of anchors on the meat of the matter. To what you were saying, candidates want personalization. They're people, they want to feel, respected. They want to feel like something is just for them. And a job is an enormous commitment for every person. If you think about and we're more of a job hopping society now than we used to be, but if you think about the average person, they're only going to work at a finite amount of companies in their career, right? And that they're spending an enormous amount of their lives at work, and they want to make sure that place is the right place for them. That they agree with the mission of that company, that they empathize with that company. And it's really hard to tell that from a large amount of corporate career sites, right, or corporate communications about roles you might apply to. Sure. So companies are changing the way that they approach this, and they're making sure that they bake a lot more of that into the application process. So they're sharing their values earlier. They're making sure that companies or candidates can look at their career site and look at employees that might be just like them, and kind of get an understanding of what it would really be like to live and work at that company. And I think that's incredibly important. And I think a lot of recruiting organizations now are thinking about the way that they can provide a really authentic window into their organization and help people understand what life there is really like. So it's an important shift. And I think if you look at kind of marketing more broadly and the move for big corporate brands to stand for something, you look at Nike or Gillette, I think it's more a case of talent departments mirroring that, but obviously what they stand for is slightly different and is more in line with the kind of candidates they're trying to apply.
For sure. You gave us so much good stuff there. And so you were talking about candidates wanting personalization, but we also kind of transitioned into this idea of companies shifting from, like you're talking about, from being reactive to being proactive. And a lot of the things that you mentioned are examples of that, right? So talking about their mission earlier, and just not waiting to talk about what it is that they stand for. And I am seeing this. I went through a job search very recently. I've only been with Sweetfish. A lot of folks out there know that, for about 4 months now. And that's exactly what I encountered. The folks who I paid attention to were the folks who did not shy away from talking about what they stand for. Because the folks that you want to recruit, I would imagine, are the ones who are interested in helping you solve whatever important problem it is that you have. And the more interested they are in that to begin with, the more likely they are to buy in. And so you're right. If you start to express those things and court those things in a more proactive way to begin with, it sounds like that's a recipe for success. Any other notes on that concept?
Yeah, well, I think to pick up on what you said there about message resonating with a future employee who is then more likely to be successful because they're a better fit. I think that's super important. And what we talk about a lot at Beamery is retention actually being something that talent organizations should be thinking about, not just core HR, because really you want to make sure that you're hiring the people that are gonna be successful at your company, and you are going to be able to retain, and they're going to be future high performers. And so it's kind of, it always puts a slightly different, and of course that's always the objective, right? But sure. I think thinking about it more in the case of like, there are candidates that are the right candidates for this organization, and there are also candidates that maybe are less of a good fit. Make sure that you kind of anchor attention to the start of the process. I think the only other thing I'd add on a kind of reactive to proactive piece, and the example that's used most frequently for this is technology and engineering candidates. So we can stick with that, but there are a lot of talent shortages now globally. There are a lot of job openings that require a certain skill set, and those certain skill sets don't necessarily grow on trees. Engineering is the example that is often used because pretty much every company now, to a certain degree, is a technology company. Look at a company like General Motors, right? They are trying to hire the engineers that Google is trying to hire. And I guess that kind of goes back to why it's important to kind of be personalized and try and stand out from the crowd. But it does mean that no company has this kind of winding line of high quality candidates around their building. They have to be proactive. They have to get the message into the market. They have to kind of approach people directly. They have to think about building a pipeline of talent in the same way that a sales organization thinks about, where's the next customer coming from, right? So the behavior change is enforced by the labor market as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's interesting. I was thinking about a little bit more about what we were talking about in terms of how to recruit for fit when it comes to this, and putting out there what it is that you stand for. A lot of the sales jobs, especially here in Austin, and I imagine other places, but Austin is sort of not sort of, Austin is absolutely booming when it comes to, B2B sales roles and sales organizations and startups and things like that. And so if I'm a candidate that's looking for, like I said, where can I get in and be a part of solving an important problem or be a part of disrupting, an industry that hasn't changed for decades. But then the job posting is telling me, how many foosball tables they have. Which I'm telling you, that's what happens. And I'm interested just to know, before we move on to this last little point, just while I got you here, I'd love to pick your brain about this. Why do you think that is? What happens? What triggers a recruiting organization to, when the opportunity is there to, like you talked about, to lead with your mission and lead with your message and appeal to people's sort of, passions, why they take the bait and talk about pool tables and kombucha?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, people obviously like kombucha, but I think the thing that a lot of companies miss is that having an important mission is a lot more important than the kind of amount of free beer that your company gives away. Now, I think, well, there's one thing that I find really interesting about this, and that's the fact that, we're talking about recruiting becoming more like marketing. In many cases, the people that are doing the recruiting they're recruiters, right? And there's not been like a kind of retraining program. We're asking new things of people that haven't had to do it before. So it's not that there's necessarily a skills gap, but there is perhaps the need for companies to think about the way that they're structuring their recruiting organizations. And what we see across most of the large enterprises that we're working with is that they actually break down the recruiting organization in a very similar way to a modern sales and marketing organization. So you have your sources, which are essentially like a BDR team. You have your employment brand team, so kind of brand marketing. You have your your full cycle recruiters, maybe more like your account executives. You have your candidate experience team, your recruiting operations, so sales and marketing ops, and so on. And having this range of skill sets allows you to think more deeply. It allows you to kind of staff and kind of get those things right. Make sure that you're communicating the right things in your job description, right? Make sure you're communicating the right things in your careers page, versus it being, like one extra thing for a, recruiter that's already juggling just how do I fill these seats. I think, like any other question with a scaling organization, it's always about, how do we find someone who has a specialized skill set that can help us do this one thing better, versus just adding another thing on the plate of someone who's having to deal with just the massive growth in headcount requirements.
Sure.
And I think a lot of the companies that do stress foosball, their recruiting organizations are a little smaller, and they're under a lot of pressure to deliver. And they don't necessarily have the time to think maybe as deeply about their employment brand. And there are obviously examples where that's not the case, but I think if you can kind of compare that with the large enterprise and more structured teams, then in many cases it's a little different. Obviously, there are exceptions to the rules in both instances.
Well, Ben, you just set me all the way straight with that answer. And what I can't move on without telling you that the empathy in that answer is stunning. You know what I'm saying? Because it could have been where, we talk about your expertise and what you've seen and what people are doing wrong, but the way that there is just this understanding of from every experience in this thing of what people are up against and this genuine desire to be a part of the solution. I am so impressed. So what's next? We've talked about, the whys and the hows of how this shift in approach. What's the next frontier in terms of marketing in recruitment?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting one. It's something we were speaking about ahead of the call. I think what we're seeing a lot of now is the move in a commercial situation or sales and marketing situation is the move towards, like a centralized data platform, right? One place to have all of your customer data, be able to report across the entire customer lifecycle, be able to pull insights from different systems in one place. And I think, we're kind of on the tip of the same thing in recruiting. There is so much valuable recruiting data, your past applicants, people that your company is speaking to on LinkedIn, people that are following you on Twitter, people that are, engaging with your employment brand in some kind of way. Right now, in many cases, that just sits in isolated systems. One of the things we're passionate about at Beamery is data and is, pulling data from different sources into one system. So you're actually able to operate effectively and operate in this new way. It's actually one of the reasons why we call the platform Talent Operating System. So it enables this new operating model. And, I think that's so important, because if you really have a clear understanding of who your candidate is, then you're able to do all the, all of the more clever things around, segmentation and personalization of communication. You're able to provide that like right place, right time, right channel type of messaging, the kind of things that sophisticated marketing teams are able to do. If you're able to apply it to a recruiting context, and you're only able to give yourself the best possible chance of hiring game-changing talent. And I think talent is, and obviously I'm biased perhaps, but ask any Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 CEO what their number one priority is. It usually comes back to talent. And if it's revenue, then talent is the driver of revenue. So I think anything that your company can do to give yourself as good a possible chance of securing your future and your company's longevity with the right people, I think is 100% worth investing in.
And I could not have said it better. I don't know that anyone could. That was that was it. That was just the type of thing. It was engaging, enthusiastic, all the E's. Get into it, guys. So now that I have successfully picked your brain and seen what it is that I could get out of it, and I'm interested in what you are putting in it. Tell us about a learning resource that you've been engaging with these days that it's just got you excited, or that's really informing your approach.
So I definitely take the no one's gone broke buying books approach. So I do a lot of reading. My book buying habit is maybe a little ahead of my book reading habit. And I try and I try and read books that have maybe been around for a little while, because I think the ones that have endured tend to have some some really interesting things to say. Like I love David Ogilvy on advertising. Well, I think it's Confessions of an Advertising Man. I think I love the Peter Drucker is great. I love Andy Grove. I can't remember the name of the book is escaping me right now. So read a lot of books, and then listen to a lot of podcasts. So this one, obviously, I listen to the SaaStr podcast, which I think is great. Marketing Trends is another great one. So yeah, I'm very much kind of around the clock learner, or at least a trend.
I have to ask you, when you say read the books, are you a fingers between the pages kind of guy, or are you listening on audio?
I'm a fingers between the pages kind of guy. I listen to some on audio, but it's more to help me go to sleep, to be totally honest. So it tends to be something a little bit lighter.
Well, thank you so much. I know that just like me, folks listening have connected with your passion for this space and what it is that you do, and will want to follow along. Ben, tell us how folks can connect with you.
Yeah, of course. So my email is probably the best place to get me. So it's ben@beamery.com. Nice and easy. And then I'm on Twitter, I think it's Ben J.H. Slater, or @Ben J.H. Slater. So those are the best places. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Yeah, happy to kind of answer any follow-up questions, or if anyone's interested, kind of riff on the subject a little more.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ben. I hope it continues to be nice and sunny there in London today.
Good for now.
Yeah, have a good one.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Nikki.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.